this Tuesday, I'm Elizabeth Cook. At this hour, President Donald Trump is meeting behind closed doors with newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney. On the agenda today, tariffs in a growing trade war. They held a bilateral meeting just moments ago with several notable exchanges. Let's take a listen to that.
Advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
And they have.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is live outside the White House for us. Ed, President Trump still bringing up making Canada a 51st state. What did you make of that exchange there?
Oh, Elizabeth, not only the language, but the body language said it all there. The President bringing it up again under questioning from reporters in the Oval Office, and you can see the Canadian Prime Minister there pining to get in with his trying to lean in and say, hold on a second, and let me make my point, which is that Canadians have made very clear over the last several months they want nothing to do with the talk of annexation. We'll see if it comes up in their private lunch, which is now believed to be underway here at the White House, and whether the Prime Minister says anything more about it later today when he addresses reporters here in Washington. The main thrust of this meeting is supposed to be about the future U.S.-Canada trade relationship. You heard the President repeatedly suggest there that the United States doesn't need Canada. Well, he should talk to the auto industry, the construction industry, the agriculture industry, the food industry in this country, because they certainly do rely on Canada, at least for now, and it would be very difficult to quickly replicate what it is the United States draws from Canada in this country. Oh, by the way, the oil industry and the energy industry more broadly, given the oil that's extracted from Alberta and the electricity that comes from Ontario, Quebec, and other parts of Canada. So the Prime Minister doing his best there to stay level-headed and perhaps not engage in a tit-for-tat there in front of the cameras. We'll wait and hear whether or not they continued that conversation behind closed doors after.
Yeah, there seemed to be a definite effort to keep everything civil with that conversation in front of reporters. And meantime, in that Q&A session, there were a wide range of topics that were addressed. What else stood out to you, Ed?
Well, just this general idea that actually one other thing the President suggested there regarding how the United States is the best supplier or producer of military equipment in the world. That is one of the things the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has suggested they may go shopping for in other parts of the world, whether it's Europe or Asia, because they're supposed to be ordering some aircraft, some other equipment to help deal with security along the Arctic Circle and that region, which of course has become a bigger concern in recent years as Russia and China especially have been sending ships through that passage. So that was interesting that the President suggested there, or at least tried to remind Carney that they may be the only customer for that. We'll see if Carney sticks to that. And then just more broadly, there was a lot of anticipation that this could go sideways real fast, or that it would be somewhat civil. And of course, the longer the President sits in a situation like that these days, it seems the longer he gets agitated, or the more likely he gets agitated. And he seemed to there towards the end, poking Carney again about the the relationship, and that it seemed like the United States is propping up Canada, and we don't necessarily need to do that. Again, if you look at the reality on the ground, the economic relationship between these two countries is so intertwined, it would take quite some time, and it may not even be possible, really, to completely undo the United States' relationship with Canada, given the reliance and given how many companies operate on both sides of the border for various reasons.
Yeah, but the president also brought up separately from the conversation of the relationship with Canada, Ed, about California, specifically the high-speed rail. And this comes, just this week alone, he's talked about making Alcatraz a prison again. He's imposing a 100% tariff on Hollywood movies made outside of the U.S. Is he just going after Gavin Newsom? Is this what this is about?
It sure seems like it, Liz. They've been frenemies off and on for years, and it does seem like he's trying to goad him for some reason into some broader conflict yet again. We now know there's been some reporting about the Alcatraz thing, that in fact there was the PBS station in West Palm Beach over the weekend was airing the movie Escape from Alcatraz at least twice, on Saturday and Sunday. And there's a belief now that the president may have actually seen the movie, and that may have sparked his interest in Alcatraz yet again. There's that. We know now that the movie tariff situation was raised by Jon Voight, the actor who's one of the three he's asked to sort of serve as envoys to Hollywood, Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson being the others. Voight was in Florida over the weekend, met with the president, and raised this issue that very quickly became presidential policy, and of course has roiled the entertainment industry there in California as they try to sort out what exactly this could mean for their bottom line and for their operations and production of not only movies but potentially television shows across the world. And then the issue with the high-speed rail, which has been an obsession of his since his first administration, for whatever reason bringing it up in a conversation with the Canadian Prime Minister. Probably a lot of Canadian viewers and people who were monitoring this meeting up there scratching their heads wondering, why on earth would he bring that up? But he did, as he sometimes does. As you said, it does seem as if he may be trying to goad the governor into some kind of a confrontation yet again.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Thank you so much for keeping notes for us on that bilat. Always great to talk to you. Well, trade policy is a top priority between the U.S. and Canada, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified on Capitol Hill today, standing firm on President Trump's tariffs. Take a listen to that.
Today, I wish to highlight the department's efforts to boost U.S. economic growth, improve government efficiency, and target illicit actors that threaten our national security. The core components of the Trump economic agenda are trade, tax cuts, and deregulation. These are not standalone policies. They are interlocking parts of an engine designed to drive economic growth and domestic manufacturing. Tax cuts and cost savings from deregulation raise real incomes for families and businesses. Tariffs create an incentive for reshoring jobs and fair trade. And deregulation complements tariffs by making it easier to invest in energy and manufacturing projects.
Let's get right to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, great to see you. What else stood out to you from the Treasury Secretary today?
I think the most newsy part of it was that Secretary Bessent confirmed that there are no ongoing negotiations with China as of now. Of course, that has sort of been a big question based on different messaging that we have heard from the White House, that we have heard from the Chinese themselves. But that was something that right out of the gate, within the first few minutes of the hearing, that became a key question. And he did confirm, after kind of sidestepping it every time he's been asked this in the past couple of weeks, that there are no ongoing negotiations as of now. He also highlighted that there are 7 countries that they are in active negotiations with. What I find very interesting, of course, the investors, businesses, consumers are watching this closely. The clip that you played, that where Bessent said trade policy will be hand in hand with tax cuts, deregulation, all of those different things are going to take time. They're going to take Congress approving that. Those are things that we might not see for a year plus in some cases. And so a lot of these businesses are looking at the tariffs, which are much more immediate, and saying, okay, well, that would be great if those other things come to fruition, but this is a challenge that I'm dealing with now. So it's not really hand in hand as of the immediate situation, Liz.
And Kelly, today kicks off the Federal Reserve's policy meeting, where a decision could be made on what to do about interest rates this week. What are we expecting to hear from that?
we are expecting them to hold interest rates steady. So we still might get interest rate cuts this year, but most firms aren't projecting that to come until July. Remember, we've got this meeting, this decision tomorrow, as well as another meeting in June. So not for a couple of meetings from now. What we're going to be looking for, though, from Chair Powell is any messaging in his press conference on where he thinks inflation is going, how trade policy will impact that. He has said before he does expect inflation to tick up because of the increase in prices that we will see from these tariffs. But what I am most interested in, Liz, is hearing him talk about this tightrope between high inflation and low growth. We did see a first quarter negative GDP number, which could be revised up. I'm very curious to hear his perspective on how he's thinking about the economy and growth ahead, because that's where you want to use interest rates. You want to use interest rates to spur growth, but it's hard to cut interest rates if you think you're going to have high inflation, Liz.
Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for joining us. All right, we are continuing to follow the legal saga of two university students at U.S. Justice Department that the U.S. Justice Department wants to deport. Both were outspoken, these students, in their support for pro-Palestinian causes. Today, a New York appeals court heard arguments in emergency appeals from the Trump administration to pause lower court orders on their detentions. Now, Tufts doctoral student Rumeysa Ozturk is being held at a detention facility in Louisiana. A lower court judge ordered her returned to Vermont for a bail hearing on May 9th. Meanwhile, Columbia University student Mohsen Madawi's arrest came on the day that he appeared for a citizenship interview. A Vermont judge ordered him released on bail after 16 days of detention. So let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. She was in court earlier today and joins us now live. Katrina, what happened today?
So, Liz, in court today, there were two sets of arguments related to Rumeysa Ozturk and Mohsen Madawi. One stark contrast in that courtroom was seeing a lone attorney for the government, Drew Ensign, and then two tables full of attorneys for Mohsen Madawi and Rumeysa Ozturk. Regarding Mohsen Madawi, what the government wants is they say that he is not eligible for bail, and they also want him re-detained. Drew Ensign, the government's attorney, argued that it causes irreparable harm to the government to have him out. Mohsen Madawi's lawyer pointed out that this doesn't have to stop the removal proceedings. She said that ICE removes people all the time without detaining them. Drew Ensign also said it would cause irreparable harm for them to have to set up a Zoom computer for Mohsen Madawi to be able to have his immigration hearings, which are out of Louisiana. But his attorney said that they could easily set that up themselves and argued that both his First and Fifth Amendment rights are being violated in this case. Now, when it comes to Rumeysa Ozturk, she has been ordered by a district court judge to be brought back to Vermont. She's currently in detention in Louisiana, and the argument here was a lot over who her custodian was when her habeas petition was filed, which is this petition to have her released because she was in transit, which has caused complications. The government claims that the rightful place for her to be and for all of us to proceed is in Louisiana. But the judges, Liz, they seemed to question this a lot. They kept asking Drew Ensign where she was when her habeas petition was filed, and he said that she was in transit. At one point, he said that he was sure that she was in Vermont, but it did seem like there were a lot of questions about where she actually was. One of the judges also pointed out the way that she was taken, Liz, which was masked men who were hooded on the street in, I think it was an unmarked car. And she said, how did they even know who was taking her? It could have been private citizens. And if her attorneys and people around her weren't informed of where she was, how would they even know what had happened to her? The judges did not end up making any decision today, but one of the ACLU attorneys said that they anticipate we could hear as early as today what they're going to rule.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much. Looking live from Dallas, where the heavy rain returns in North Texas. Meteorologist Jessica Birch tracking it next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. It is day 2 of jury selection in the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean P. Diddy Combs in New York. The judge plans to bring in 50 prospective jurors every day until a jury of 12 people and 6 alternates is selected. The hip-hop artist has been in custody since September on federal charges. Opening statements in his trial are expected to begin next week. And we take you live to Memphis, where closing arguments continue in the trial of 3 former police officers charged in the death of Tyree Nichols. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith face second-degree murder charges in state court. Tyree Nichols died in a hospital 2 years ago after he was beaten by officers following a traffic stop. The sounds of pro-Palestinian protesters taking over a building at the University of Washington in Seattle. More than 24 were arrested just last night. They demanded the university cut ties with Boeing over the company's military contracts and its role in supplying weapons used in the war in Gaza. Looking live now from North Texas, where heavy rain returns today in places like Dallas. But we've already seen damage from severe weather from yesterday. Take a look at this. Wow, that lightning strike caught on camera in Colleyville, that's north of Fort Worth, Texas. That sparked a house fire at that home. We've learned 3 people were taken to the hospital with minor injuries. And the search continues right now for a 10-year-old girl swept away by rising floodwaters in Texas. This is in Brenham. That's about 75 miles away from Houston. Very tense time there in Texas because there's 2 storms that are really battering the state right now.
Well, there's one down in Texas pushing throughout the south. We're also dealing with extreme storms up into the northeast too. That's what's been impacting people up in New York, Boston, dealing with anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain. But we head down to the south. The big concern today is another chance for tornado activity. We could see damaging winds and of course flooding potential too. So I want to dive over into the map and show you that system that's pushing throughout Texas right now, making its way across the Mississippi and eventually pushing all the way over. This is the next 48 hours, eventually pushing all the way over into Tennessee, down into Atlanta, Georgia, and over into the Carolinas as well. Now, the storm is gaining plenty of strength because there's plenty of moisture being pushed in from the Gulf, too. So we're seeing a lot of activity from this exact system as we head into the next 48 hours. I want to time it out behind me real fast and show you what's happening for us. Throughout the past 24 hours, we've seen those 2 storms, like we just mentioned with Liz, one push up into the northeast and one make its way across the south, but we're not done just yet. That extreme chance for severe weather lasts today. That enhanced risk actually stretches anywhere from Austin, Texas over into Houston, pushing over the border of Louisiana too. So there is a good chance we could see tornadoes today and at least damaging winds. Wind speeds anywhere up to around 50, 60 miles per hour at times throughout these local communities. We're concerned about localized flooding too in these exact same areas. And we've been watching the tornado warnings and watches in effect right now. Some of the smaller counties just south of Waco, Texas, earlier today, and just within the past 30 minutes actually, had tornado warnings issued by the National Weather Service. And now we're concerned, of course, about damaging winds too. We're going to continue to keep a close eye on this big storm system as it moves over Louisiana into our our Wednesday forecast, pushing all the way into Thursday as it makes its way closer to the Carolinas and pushing back offshore. So lots to talk about with this system. Of course, we'll have more on the northern one up in New York coming up in just a bit, but we do keep a close eye on those millions of people impacted by thunderstorms today.
Yeah, it's been rough back east in the Midwest as well when it comes to these storms.
You're right.
All right, well, it is peak season for floral gifts, but what about those tariffs? A look at the supply chain and how you could potentially save this Mother's Day. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The deadline for Americans to obtain a real ID to fly domestically is tomorrow. But if you don't have one yet, Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem confirmed you'll still be able to fly, at least for now. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, who's been following this story from our newsroom. Chanel, can you break down what the Homeland Security Secretary actually said?
Yeah, we heard from her in just the last hour. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem saying travelers with no real ID can fly for now, but likely with some extra steps. So she didn't explain exactly what those steps will be. Listen.
We will be honoring passports, other federally recognized IDs. Tribal IDs will be recognized. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. And what will happen tomorrow is folks will come through the line and will be issue their ID and show it. If it's not compliant, they may be diverted to a different line. have an extra step, but people will be allowed to fly. We recognize that this is a security issue. Congress has had many, many years to reevaluate it and decide if they wanted to change the law or to stop it. And the Biden administration chose that it should go into place on May 7th, and we intend to follow the law. So we will make sure that it is as seamless as possible and that travelers will get to stay on their intended itinerary. But we are telling people that this law will be enforced, and it will allow us to know individuals in this country who they are and that they're authorized to travel.
So notably there, Liz, Nome did not announce a potential delay on the Real ID requirement or rollout. It is still set to take effect tomorrow, but she did there signal that some travelers who don't yet have that lined up may still be able to fly for a while, meaning you might face some enhanced security procedures or protocols when you're at the airport, but it does sound like you will not be denied access to your flight, at least for now.
That's good news, because I know a lot of people procrastinated on this. We've seen some long lines at the DMV, Chanel. Hopefully, people hoping to get it in the last minute. All right, thank you so much. Well, peak season is upon us for all things floral. Mother's Day, by the way, is coming up this weekend. And while the U.S. does grow some of its own flowers, the bulk of the blooms come from overseas and are subject to tariffs. CBS News correspondent Michael George shows us there is concern that extra cost could hurt your budget.
We get flowers from Ecuador, Colombia, Canada, Thailand, Holland.
Chances are the stems in your favorite bouquet have traveled, and these days that likely means a tariff.
We're going to do the best we can to sort of keep those prices where they need to be, but people can definitely expect to be paying a little bit more.
80% of flowers consumed in the United States are grown elsewhere. Last year, the U.S. imported $2.2 billion worth of cut flowers and greens, the bulk of it from South America.
The fact that they can grow year-round gave them a natural advantage.
Kate Penn is CEO of the Society of American Florists. She says domestically, small growers, many of them an acre or less, have flourished since the pandemic, selling at farmers markets and to a blossoming wedding industry.
The consumer does want to buy local, especially brides. They love to be able to have local flowers featured.
But even small growers like Moonshot Farm here in East Windsor, New Jersey, aren't immune to the fallout from tariffs.
The bulbs that we grow these from are imported from Italy and Holland.
Farmer Rebecca Kutzer-Rice says she just received her first few shipments to be hit with 10% tariffs.
We're estimating it could cost our small business anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which for a small farm is almost the equivalent of like a salary of another employee.
Industry experts say consumers can still get what they want, just set a budget and let the florist work their magic.
There literally are countless substitutions, and florists are just masters at creating something that's still going to make a big impact.
A rosy outlook, even with the added cost of tariffs. Michael George, CBS News, East Windsor, New Jersey.
Now, even farm supplies are imported and subject to tariffs as well. And for florists, many of their containers, like vases and other accessories, come from China and face even stiffer fees. But the Society of American Florists says a lot of vendors started stocking up on those items shortly after the election. Well, another day of delays and cancellations in New Jersey. We'll take you to Newark Airport for the air traffic controller shortage. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Looking live now from New Jersey, where Newark Airport faces a 9th day of delays and cancellations. Close to 900 flights have been canceled in and out of the airport over the past week, including dozens already today. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve reports on the air traffic controller shortage.
By 7 this morning, the FAA had hit what it calls a staffing trigger at Newark Airport, meaning there weren't enough staff at the facility that has had these issues to run a full schedule at that airport. So they are slowing down traffic once again at Newark Liberty, the nation's 12th busiest airport. That means long delays, again likely today. By 7 a.m., they were pushing 3 hours, likely will get worse as the day goes on. That airport is also dealing with some runway construction. You have some weather conditions that are unfavorable. So this is the 9th day of this staffing issue that stems from a series of outages at an FAA facility that tracks planes coming in and out of Newark. controllers last Monday after an outage where their screens essentially went blank for a period of time. It was brief. We've heard 30 seconds. We've heard up to 90 seconds. Nonetheless, about a half dozen controllers basically requested trauma leave because of the working conditions. They have the right to be out up to 45 days. So this is could be a prolonged staffing issue around Newark Airport. United Airlines has a travel waiver in place through the 17th for flights coming in and out of Newark, if that gives you some sense as to how long that airport's biggest carrier thinks this could go on. The FAA says they are working on improving the resiliency and the redundancy at that facility as well as others in the New York City area as they try to make the system better while acknowledging it is antiquated. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy expected to announce a plan to modernize air traffic control as soon as Thursday, while Senate Democrats are calling for an inspector general investigation into what went wrong at this FAA facility. Back to you.
Chris, thank you. Now, we have some developing news on the Trump administration's immigration policies. A New York federal judge has blocked President Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport any non-citizens in the Southern District of New York. So let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoyo Galvez. Camilo, great to see you. What more can you tell us about that New York ruling?
Hi, Liz. This really is an important court ruling because it is the second time that a federal judge, in this case in New York, has told the Trump administration that President Trump unlawfully invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport certain Venezuelan migrants. Just to level set, Liz, back in March, President Trump invoked this really extraordinary and unprecedented wartime authority dating back to the 18th century, saying that the Venezuelan gang known as Tren de Aragua was orchestrating an invasion or a predatory incursion into the U.S., and thus suspected members of that Venezuelan gang had to be deported from the U.S. under this wartime law dating back to 1798. And President Trump ordered the deportation, for example, of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants accused of being part of this gang to El Salvador, which imprisoned them at this mega prison in that Central American country. But now this federal judge, just like one in Texas last week, has found that the Alien Enemies Act cannot be used in this context, Liz, because there is no invasion or predatory incursion as the writers of this law intended that word or those words to actually mean. And so far, the administration continues to face repeated multiple losses in federal court on this question, but it is really important to note that this court ruling only applies to migrants who are detained in the Southern District of New York, and so the administration can still arrest people under this wartime authority in other parts of the country, rather.
And Camilo, the administration is also offering migrants $1,000 to self-deport. What's been the reaction to that?
Well, Liz, recognizing that Immigration and Customs Enforcement does not have the manpower or the resources to locate, arrest, detain, and deport every single person who is here in the country illegally, the administration is pushing for self-deportations. And they are now instructing migrants who are in the country unlawfully to use a government smartphone app known as CBP Home to sign up for self-deportation. And if they do that, the government is now offering them a free airline ticket back to their home country, as well as $1,000 as a self-deportation bonus, if you will, if the government actually confirms that they carried out that self-deportation and voluntarily returned to their home country. So this is part of their carrot and stick strategies to try to push as many people as possible to leave the country voluntarily, or obviously to find them and deport them forcibly from the country list.
It'll be interesting to see how many people take the president up on that offer. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoyo Galvez. Thank you so much, Camilo. Well, all of the cardinals expected to take part in the secret conclave to elect a new pope have arrived in Rome. It will start behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City tomorrow. Here's coverage from CBS News New York earlier on some of the top contenders to be the next pope.
all Vatican personnel. We're talking about cooks, cleaners, doctors, clerks, all of them, about 100, must take an oath of secrecy under penalty of excommunication. The cardinals who will elect the next pope will take an oath of secrecy tomorrow. They will begin the process of electing the next pope with a first vote tomorrow. The cardinals consider the top contenders are called the papabili, the Italian word for popable, and who will ultimately become the leader of the church is a subject on nearly everyone's mind here in Rome. As cardinals continue to pay tribute to Pope Francis, they pray for guidance and have asked for the world's prayers for the enormity of the task ahead. Churches across the globe and in New York have answered that call for support in choosing the next pope, including St. John the Baptist Church in Yonkers. What do you think parish priests are hoping for in the selection process?
I really believe that we're looking for a Holy Father who has a pastoral heart.
Father Stephen Norton is the pastor.
And one of the things that he challenged us as priests, as parish priests, was to not just sit in our rectories, not just sit in the church, but to be outside with God's people. His phrase to us in the beginning of his pontificate was, go out and smell like the sheep. In other words, be one with God's people.
The faithful look to the College of Cardinals in selecting the new leader. Will he be one of the papabili, as they're called, the likely contenders to be pope? And while any of the men in the conclave may be elected, in fact, any baptized man can become pope, most are watching a handful of cardinals carefully. 70-year-old Italian Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who served as Pope Francis's Secretary of State. 68-year-old Filipino Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has been dubbed by some as the Asian Francis. 65-year-old Congolese Cardinal Fridolin Ambogo Bezongo is a strong defender of human rights. 2 Americans have seen growing support. 72-year-old Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark, New Jersey, a gifted linguist who has served in senior Vatican positions. 69-year-old Cardinal Robert Prevost from Chicago, who heads the Vatican's department overseeing bishops, spent years working in Peru. When Pope Francis was elected, he was not considered one of the papabile.
Buonasera.
The interesting note for those who hope to become pope, there's a saying here, the one who enters the conclave as pope comes out as a cardinal. So the experts believe a dark horse candidate may emerge from that balcony at St. Peter's Basilica as the next pontiff.
And we will be watching. Stay with CBS News 24/7 for continuing coverage of the conclave tomorrow. We will bring you the Cardinals' procession to the Sistine Chapel and a special report tomorrow around 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. And as we go out, a live look from New Jersey as the rain sticks around the tri-state area all week long. Meteorologist Jessica Birch has what you can expect next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Meanwhile, it is day 2 of jury selection in the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean P. Diddy Combs in New York. The judge plans to bring in 50 prospective jurors every day until a jury of 12 people and 6 alternates is selected. The hip-hop artist has been in custody since September on federal charges. Opening statements in his trial are expected to begin next week. And jury deliberations just started in the trial of 3 former Memphis police officers charged in the death of Tyree Nichols. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith face second-degree murder charges in state court. Tyree Nichols died in a hospital 2 years ago after he was beaten by officers following a traffic stop. The sounds of pro-Palestinian protesters taking over a building at the University of Washington in Seattle. More than 24 were arrested last night. They demanded the university cut ties with Boeing over the company's military contracts and its role in supplying weapons used in the war in Gaza. Columbia University announced 180 staff members who work on federally granted projects have been let go. This comes after the Trump administration announced it is cutting off federal funding to the university. The university says, quote, moving forward, we'll be running lighter footprints of research infrastructure in some areas and in others, maintaining a level of research continuity as we pursue alternate funding sources. Also happening this week, the Trump administration cut off all new federal research grants to Harvard. The education secretary told the university they're not eligible for any new grants until it meets the administration's demands. All right, our feed's now giving us a live look from Newark with the wet weather just getting started this week in the tri-state area. Jess, this is probably not good for those massive delays that we're seeing at airports.
No, I mean, yesterday's delays were wild to think about. We're still seeing more today when it comes to just active severe weather up there. We already talked about Texas and the South. They're dealing with a very similar outlook too, but we're going to turn our eyes a little bit more north now because another big concern right now has to do with the amount of rain we've seen so far, and we're not even done just yet. I'm going to pull up two things real fast just to kind of show you. We're going to zoom into areas like Connecticut and Massachusetts. Places over here have seen anywhere up to around 6 inches, almost 7 inches of rain, and we're not done with that just yet. The next 48 hours, we're going to see a series of showers sweep in from inland areas, and with that too, we could see thunderstorm activity, a chance for flooding. We could also see very gusty winds at times as well. So far, we've gotten over 4 inches of rain in places in New York and Connecticut. Massachusetts got over 5 inches, and we're, like I said, not done. The next 48 hours is very telling when it comes to how strong the storm system is. Notice how it works in a counterclockwise direction. This is an area of low pressure that continues to sweep across upstate New York, the center of it, as we head into our Wednesday and Thursday forecast. We'll see on and off showers at that point. We're also dealing with gusty winds. And of course, the other big concern has to do with that localized flooding in upstate New York, closer to Buffalo, all the way over into Syracuse. We could see anywhere up to around 3 additional inches of rain just within the next 38 hours. And we'll continue to keep a very close eye on this as we head into the coming days. But I mean, just the last 24 hours alone, you head to the south, places like Texas and Oklahoma, who have been dealing with weeks after weeks of heavy storms. They're continuing to see more of the same, getting soaked and dealing with very damaging winds, and another chance for tornado activity all the way down in the south. I'll have more on that coming up in just a bit. Here's what it's looking like for that severe weather outlook today. An enhanced risk all the way over into Houston and Austin, and that stretches over into Louisiana too.
It is our Eye on America. CBS News is hearing your stories in your communities across the country. Well, all eyes on the conclave as Catholic churches in America wait for the cardinals to make their decision on who will be the next pope. Nearly 20% of the country identifies as Catholic. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassman checks in with the largest parish in America about its expectations for the new pontiff.
You feel it inside America's largest Catholic parish, the intimacy of grief.
All eyes are on Holy Mother Church. Her shepherd is gone, and now we're seeking a new shepherd.
In Visalia, California, we first met Father Alex Chavez last year. He's the parish priest here at St. Charles Borromeo. Sunday services routinely fill all 3,200 seats in the sanctuary.
The seat of Peter is empty. Right, we're orphaned.
Since the death of Pope Francis, Catholics everywhere ask themselves the same question.
What are the qualities that you hope to see in the next pope?
Just convey the truth clearly, allowing us, those on the front lines, to deal with the obstacles that the people come with.
It's divinely instituted.
We also spoke to the church's next generation of clerics.
The church will remain the same today, tomorrow, and forever.
Father Jose Maria Carrillo is a 29-year-old priest at St. Charles. Deacon Nemeso Santana will be ordained later this month.
Are there personal attributes that you're looking for in the next pope?
Yep, same humility that our Holy Father portrayed.
That love for the people, to take care of the people.
Visalia sits in California's San Joaquin Valley. Rich in farmland, it's one of the world's breadbaskets.
Here at St. Charles, the majority immigrant congregation explains why 2 of the 3 Sunday Masses here are always held in Spanish. Many of them feel under attack these days and saw Pope Francis as their spiritual champion. How many would you say were here illegally?
Maybe 15 to 20%.
And they are hopeful that whoever the next pope is sees them.
Yes, will convey the same Christ-like message that the Pope is there to voice their concern in a global setting. We could be just as political as, right, as our nation's politicians. But we trust at the end of all that politics that the Holy Spirit will prevail.
In this profound moment of faith, priests and parishioners alike look for light in the shadows of the conclave. For Eye on America, Mark Strassman in Visalia, California.
And stay with CBS News and CBS News 24/7 for live coverage of the conclave. Before we send you out, we're going to leave you with live pictures from the White House as we wait for newly elected Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to leave his meeting there with President Donald Trump. They held a bilateral meeting earlier today and took questions from reporters. The big headline to come out of that, President Trump doubling down on his intention to make Canada the 51st state, but Prime Minister Carney pushed back, saying Canada is not for sale. We're going to continue covering this meeting today with Lindsay Reiser, who takes over next right here on CBS News 24/7.